So your automatic transmission is working flawlessly, and in an attempt to keep it working flawlessly, you decide to service the transmission. That involves draining the fluid, dropping the oil pan to gain access to the filter, get that replaced, do a little house cleaning while you're in there, and then it's on to buttoning everything back up and getting the trans filled back up with fresh ATF. You do all that, fire up the engine, do another top off of the fluid level, and get it ready for the road test. You take the vehicle out on the road test and instantly you realize there's a problem. The vehicle feels sluggish, or the engine feels sluggish. In other words, your vehicle isn't accelerating as fast as it did before the transmission service. But it does upshift, so you continue forward with the road test. And in doing so, you do wind up getting the vehicle up to highway speeds. And when you're at highway speeds, you realize that you can hear that the engine is louder than it was before the transmission service, at least when going down the highway. And you also notice that the RPMs seem to be higher than you remember them being at that particular road speed. So every time I hear this exact same scenario, it always has me leaning towards a problem with, hey, what's going on? My name's Robert, and you are watching Southpaw Auto Works, a show that's all about making automatic transmission repair accessible to everyone. Don't think you have what it takes to do this kind of work? Think again, because if it's possible for a one-armed southpaw like me, then it's definitely possible for you. When I hear this exact scenario, it has me leaning towards a problem with the shift solenoid. This one happens to be out of the GM4L60E automatic transmission. This transmission was used for over 20 years, from 1993 through 2014. The transmission was used by 10 different vehicle manufacturers, and it can be found in over 60 different vehicle models. This transmission comes in a number of popular vehicles, including but not limited to the Chevy Camaro, the Corvette, Silverado, Suburban, Tahoe, and that's just to name a handful of Chevrolet's lineup, and that's just one manufacturer out of those 10 manufacturers that use this unit. If you're interested in seeing if your vehicle is equipped with this transmission, we've got an exhaustive list of vehicles in the video description down below. Back to our original problem. The transmission was serviced. Prior to the service, everything worked great. After the service, now the vehicle's slow to accelerate and it's working harder to maintain highway speeds. Every time I hear this scenario, I think, or I lean towards a problem with the shift solenoid, specifically with the 4L60E. The 4L60E is equipped with 2 of these shift solenoids. They're identical parts, but when I hear this problem, slow acceleration, hard to maintain highway speed, I'm leaning specifically towards a problem with the 1-2 shift solenoid. As the name implies, the solenoid's partially responsible for creating first gear. But what's not so obvious is that same solenoid is also partially responsible for creating fourth gear. So when there's a problem with the solenoid, it can result in the loss of both first gear and fourth gear. You gotta have first gear for maximum acceleration, and we gotta have fourth gear for highway cruising. That leaves us with the question, how does servicing this transmission cause a problem with the 1-2 shift solenoid? The real problem lies in taking shortcuts. The 4L60E, when removing the pan, it's super easy to unbolt the pan, but in some vehicle models, there's a lot of stuff in the way, like the exhaust, for example. And even though the oil pan has been unbolted and should, in theory, come right out, it won't because of lack of clearance. So what people will do is they'll try to force the pan out with either their hands, or they'll use the assistance of a pry bar, and they will try to pry the pan out of a tight spot. And it's super obvious in those situations that the pan is, being wedged up against an exhaust or some other vehicle component. But what people don't realize is that the inside of the pan is being wedged up against the shift solenoids. And when we put those shift solenoids under that kind of stress, they can get damaged. This part of the shift solenoid is made out of plastic, and when we pry on the solenoids, it's this part that can develop a crack. A A crack in this part of the solenoid makes it impossible for the solenoid to operate properly. If you're interested in learning the ins and outs of how a shift solenoid works, I've got an awesome free resource for you. More on that in just a minute. To bring it full circle, a perfectly good transmission was serviced, and in doing so, the shift solenoid was inadvertently damaged. The solution is to open the transmission back up and inspect the shift solenoid for cracks or other damage. Before I touch on the free resources, if you found this video and this type of content of value, please do me a solid by hitting that like button. If you're new here to the channel and you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell too. So as promised, the free resources. If you're interested in learning all about how a shift solenoid works and even how a shift valve works, we've got 2 videos we previously produced. You can find shortcuts to those videos in the video description down below. And there'll be some pop-ups that appear at the end of this video. Once again, my name's Robert. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode, and I will see you in another one real soon.
I work hard each and every day. I get lost in the words I say. I don't push pause, no, I push play. I won't stop till I hear him say, oh, oh.